It's interesting. Over the weekend, I actually sat down and watched. I wanted to see like a Bernie rally beginning to end. I know I'm really a masochist. So I sat down and I watched a Bernie rally beginning to end in Iowa. I want to tell you about that. And I want to talk about the appeal of Bernie Sanders, which I think Republicans are underestimating. And really tells you what you need to know about the sort of Bernie Sanders campaign. And that is everything Bernie Sanders does is about, quote unquote, building a movement. If you watch one of his rallies, from beginning to end, he feels like a 1960s style professor who's doing a teach-in. And it's deliberately created like this. I mean, this is what his rallies are created to do. This is how he speaks. He has this sort of, we're speaking up to the man. We're not just here to stop Donald Trump. We're here to build a movement. And then he's very vague about what exactly the movement constitutes, because it would be very odd if the Soviet national anthem started playing in the background or something to give you a clue. So he does this whole teach-in mentality. And that means, for example, about 10 days ago, he did a rally in Iowa, or not even, it was like 6 days ago. He did a rally in Iowa, in Ames, Iowa. And the rally opened with the band Portugal the Man playing for him, very popular band. I've played one of their songs on the show. They do catchy tunes. And one of their guys gets up at the end of this, and he says, you know, when I was asked to play at this Bernie rally, well, I had one stipulation, that every one of our concerts, we ask indigenous people to come to the concert, and we ask them to stand up and explain why we are standing on stolen land. So he then ushers up 3 Native American women in Ames, Iowa, to explain why Iowa is actually stolen land. Right? This is the opener of the Bernie Sanders rally, is that we are standing on stolen land. So basically, the foundations of the United States are evil. Right? That is the opener at the Bernie Sanders rally. Then these Native American women, they get up, they talk about all of this, they leave, and Michael Moore gets up. And Michael Moore, who is indeed a radical, I mean, the man made a movie about how the Cuban healthcare system is a joy of joys and a wonder of wonders, which is why everybody in Cuba is trying to escape from Cuba on a 1957 Chevy with tires blown up around the sides, trying to float their way to Miami, which, by the way, is not an easy thing to do, right? 90 miles of shark-infested waters just to get away from that wonderful healthcare system that Michael Moore is so high on. So Michael Moore then gets up, and Michael Moore does this shtick about how America is founded in racism and sexism and bigotry and homophobia and inequality, and how Bernie Sanders is going to completely revolutionize the way politics is done, right? He gets up and he does his shtick for like 20 minutes. And then after that, he ushers up Bernie Sanders. And now Bernie looks like that. Well, actually, I'm sorry. Then he ushers up AOC. Okay, AOC gets up. And she gets up and she starts talking about how America is a corrupt system. And AOC, again, is quite good on the stump, right? She's charismatic, and she gets up and she does her shtick about how America is terrible and America is awful, and how she is for Bernie because Bernie is the most radical guy in the field. And then she ushers up Bernie, and Bernie is the elder statesman right now, because you've seen Portugal the Man, 3 Native American women explaining that Iowa is bad, followed by Michael Moore, who's a crazy person, followed by AOC, who's an even crazier person. When they usher up Bernie seems almost moderate by comparison with the rest of the rally, because Bernie's shtick is not the Bernie that you actually see during the debates. During the debates, you got Bernie yelling all the time about unfairness and about healthcare, and America is terrible. During his rallies, he speaks instead like some sort of UC Berkeley 1968 professor. Right? It's much more lower pitched. Right? It's much lower pitched. He gets up and he says, we live in a country that has serious inequality, and you and I together, we're going to build a movement. It sounds much more reasonable. And it's designed like this, right? It's actually quite clever. And again, his whole shtick is, we're not just going to defeat Donald Trump, who is the worst person who ever lived, but also we're going to build a movement. And this is why he's got momentum right now, because Joe Biden's case is only defeating Trump. Bernie Sanders' case is, I'm going to build a movement. And that is a lot more inspiring, particularly to young people. Now, older people are going, we don't need a movement. We just need to stop Trump, right? We don't like Trump. Trump's bad. But Bernie is like, no, we're going to stop Trump, and we're going to build a movement. Now, make no mistake, his first pitch is, we're going to stop Trump. And that's the only unifying pitch he has. Because the truth is that his movement is popular with his movement. It is not popular with the bulk of Americans. There's a new poll that came out that should scare the living daylights out of Democrats that showed what Americans think of capitalism versus socialism. There's a poll from NBC News, Wall Street Journal, released on Sunday. More than half of registered voters, 52%, have a positive view of capitalism. 18% have a negative perception of capitalism. I don't know what happened to the other 30%, whether they were hit in the head by a brick or something. But the fact that you live in the greatest economy in the history of the world, and you live in a capitalist system that has generated more wealth since 1800 than in the entire history of humanity combined, and that only 52% of you think that capitalism is good, demonstrates a real lack of education in the American system. But I will say, only 19% of voters have a positive view of socialism, whereas 53% have a negative perception of socialism. And Bernie Sanders openly declares that he is a socialist. Right? He always says democratic socialism, but he's an actual socialist in the sense that he still cannot explain why he would not nationalize all of the industries he said he would want to nationalize, with that said, look, Bernie right now in this poll is leading Trump nationally 49-45. That is not enough to beat Trump because when all the votes come in, it's probably more like 48 Trump, and most of those are in the swing states, whereas Bernie is racking up big scores in places like California and New York, right? Places that already agree with Bernie. So if you are in the Democratic Party base and all you want to do is beat Trump, you're scared. But this is why the primaries are really, really a problem for Joe Biden, because the people who are voting in the primaries are the most excited. They're the people who want to feel like they're part of a movement. They're the people who are the most passionate, the people who are the quote unquote most well-educated, the people who follow this stuff the most closely. And those people are in Bernie Sanders' corner. So the primaries are cutting directly against the electoral interest of the Democrats. Now, with that said, do I think that Republicans who are rooting for Bernie's nomination are underestimating him? I do. I think that Bernie is shockingly interesting on the stump. Like having, again, watched one of his entire events over the weekend. I think he is shockingly interesting on the stump. I think that he's good at what he does, which is be a useless communist for his entire life, but give you the feeling that there's a conspiratorial elite coming after you, which is a different thing than like Elizabeth Warren does it, but it's louder and it's more brash and it's not as weird. It's weird, right? Because if you watch them in debate, you think that Warren is the one who's more modulated because in debate she is. But if you watch them on the stump, Warren is a lot less modulated than Sanders. Sanders comes off as softer spoken on the stump than Elizabeth Warren does, which is really kind of a fascinating contrast. But with that said, is Bernie in a position where the Democratic Party upper echelon should be frightened of him? They should. They should. Like, I think Republicans are underestimating, but I also think that it's quite possible that Bernie gets skunked by Donald Trump. And if you're a member of the Democratic Party elite, the fact that he's building a movement in the primaries that is not going to carry over to the general beyond that core is not going to be super helpful to you. And as you'll see, Bernie's people are actively alienating other elements of the Democratic Party. Thank you for tuning in to the Daily Wire, one of the fastest growing conservative media outlets in the country. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss out on any of our content.